Hello and welcome to World Stories. I'm Sumi Somaskanda and this is your International Reporters Magazine. Get ready because we're going to take you on a ride around the world, from Bangladesh to Hungary and all the way to Kenya. We hope you enjoy the journey. We start out in a region of Bangladesh called Chalan Bil. Every year during the rainy season, the waters in the marshy wetlands swell and flood the low-lying areas around it. Nearby villages are submerged and the lives of both old and young are disrupted. Now, a non-profit organization has found an ingenious way to keep children in class even when the flooding peaks. ETV's Sakawat Liton brings us this story.
Water is a way of life in Bangladesh. Every year, the monsoon rains cause chaos across the country, destroying crops, homes, and even leaving entire villages underwater. The Chalan Bil wetland in the northwest of the country is one of the hardest hit areas. And finding ways to cope with the annual floods dominates people's lives. When the rains come, the only way to get around is by boat. But boats are not just used as a mode of transport here. Some have been converted into floating classrooms. These school boats ensure that the education of underprivileged children does not get cut short when the heavens open up.
It's mainly primary education. We provide education from grades 1 to 3. In addition, we also have a boat with a library on board.
We provide services to underprivileged children in various districts of Bangladesh.
The floods cause thousands of children to drop out of school, and some kids here have never been to school. Every morning, the school boats dock at the riverbank to pick up the pupils.
I'm in grade 3 and come to school at 10 o'clock. I learn Bengali, English, math, religion, science, and sociology. We provide computer training in addition to the regular classes. The children are taught well. They can't go far in the flooded areas, but they should do their studies, so we admit them to this school. They take monthly exams and we're informed of their results and can give extra classes if necessary.
We provide education and other services to 4 villages in the area. The first grade pupils study here for 2 hours a day, and the third grade pupils learn for 3 hours a day.
The school boats are outfitted with the latest technology found in schools on dry land. Computers and internet access have opened a new world to the children and to their parents. With no source of electricity, the school harnesses the power of the sun.
We have a boat library, computer training, and internet. We provide these services with the help of solar energy.
I've been a pupil at this school for 4 months. We take classes here from 12 p.m. to 2 p.m. Then I go home.
The floods make getting around a challenge, but that's where the school's library comes in. It helps students learn about Bangladesh and the rest of the world, and it's a big hit with students. Many choose to stay long after home time.
I read academic books and also storybooks here. I also take computer training and surf the internet.
The library and computer section are both part of the boat library. There are about 1,500 books here. Members are allowed to borrow them and take them home.
I get a lot of help here, more than from my school.
We lend many kinds of books to our members: academic books, storybooks, journals, fairy tales, novels.
An organization called Shidulai is behind the floating school project. Its success has made many optimistic that Bangladesh can tackle almost anything that Mother Nature can throw at it.
An organization named Shidulai gives underprivileged children in the area an opportunity to get an education. They've been successful in making children go to school. The underprivileged children of Chalan Bil have their own email addresses, so they are connected to the rest of the world.
The project has given new hope to the people of the Chalanbio wetland. Pupils and parents alike are convinced that if similar schools were set up in other flood-prone areas, they could go a long way toward helping the country's children get a better start in life.
That looks like a promising project. Now to an unusual form of art. When we think of sand, most of us imagine pristine beaches, big waves and palm trees, but not much else. Well, not Ferenc Sako. The Hungarian artist uses ordinary sand in an extraordinary way to sculpt, draw, and paint images in a live show. As MTVA reporter Livia Berta shows us, his performances are wildly popular, and it's no wonder why. Take a look.
Flour, sugar, breadcrumbs, iron powder. Ferenc Sako had tried almost everything before he decided to give sand a go. He found it didn't stick to his glass and could be used to create stunning images. The artist made up his mind to stick with it, and 2 years later invented a new art form, live sand animation.
17 years ago, the projector appeared. I had always wanted to perform live, but there was no suitable device on the market. Then the projector came out, and I asked my colleagues if a camcorder could be attached to it. That was my invention. A video camera recording live sand painting with music in the background, and all that projected onto a screen.
News about his special new art spread like wildfire, and Ferenc Sako's sand shows quickly became the talk of the town, from Los Angeles to Tokyo. He's performed in places that had never seen art like this before. Small theaters, huge sporting arenas, and on TV shows watched by millions. But he's always prepared to paint with sand for just a handful of people. Sand usually conjures up images of deserts and beaches. So you might imagine Ferenc Sako collecting his material at exotic locations around the globe. But his source of sand is much closer to home. He claims that Hungarian sand is the slipperiest of all. The artist tracks down his own and even told us how.
If I see a pile of sand at a construction site, I just fill a plastic bag and that gives me enough for a year. I'm talking about very small amounts. A few kilos are enough for an entire year.
That's as long as members of the audience don't nab some of his sand for themselves. Sometimes they just can't resist taking away a handful of his essential prop.
One time, someone in the audience took some sand I had left on the table. I saw them putting it into small envelopes and taking it home with them.
Artist Noemi Sabo is one of those fascinated by sand painting. She decided to try her hand at it, but feels it's not her thing. She's decided to leave it to experts like Ferenc Sako and stick to what she knows.
It's magic. I can understand someone putting their whole life into it, because it's art that just lasts for a moment in time. But Sako is the master. It's really hard, so I'm sticking to canvas and my familiar techniques.
Music plays an important part in Sako's show. Choosing the music is the first step. Then he puts pen to paper. The sand painter sketches a storyboard of his entire show. After that, he picks up a handful of sand and paints on his light box, first without and then with music.
The improvisational character of my art arises from an incredible amount of practice. Not only do I have to tell a story all the way to the end of the music, but I also have to finish painting exactly when the music ends. It would be awkward if I was still painting when the music had already finished, or vice versa. Practice is vital, so that people think they can do it too, and it looks so easy.
Sako has been touring the world for 17 years with his live sand painting. You might think he'd seen it all, but unexpected reactions can still surprise him.
One time the director agreed to turn on the lights when he waved. He waved, the lights went up, but the audience sat in silence. We thought it must have been a bad show. But actually, they were completely immersed. Usually 90% of the audience can't tell when the show ends. They were waiting for the show to continue, even though the lights were on. After that, we got a standing ovation, but I've never seen a whole audience staring up at a blank screen for 5 minutes.
Ferenc Sako is not one to rest on his laurels. He's been working on a new show featuring a new invention. It's certain to be another mesmerizing production in true Sako style.
It was a little over a year ago that Egypt witnessed one of the worst outbreaks of football violence the country has ever seen. At a match in Port Said, a huge riot broke out between rival fans and more than 70 people were killed. The remainder of the season was canceled, but a new one has just kicked off. Football is a beloved sport in Egypt, but from the pitch to the stands, it's long been a man's game. Still, that didn't stop Mona Abdulhamid from taking to the pitch. On TV shares the story of a pioneer in Egyptian soccer.
Mona Abdulhamid is mad about Egypt's most popular sport, the beautiful game of soccer. Mona first took to the pitch when she was just 14, and then in her early 20s, she became one of Egypt's first ever female referees.
I've been qualified as a soccer referee in Egypt since 2001 and internationally since 2002. I got my start as a referee at the Samoha Club. I was 14 years old at the time. The captain discovered me there and gave a spot in the national team of referees.
Getting so far was no easy feat in Egypt's patriarchal society. It took determination and courage. Many players get angry if they disagree with a call, but Mona takes it all in her stride. In fact, it was the players who helped her first get into refereeing.
I got to be a referee by chance. I met the captain of the Samoha Club, Captain Mahmoud. He was still with the club at the time, and he told me to apply to the team's managing committee. Other players also encouraged me to try for it and gave me support. It wasn't easy. There are many tests you have to take, both practical and theoretical. It's essential for everyone who wants to become a referee to have played soccer themselves. As I see it, the status of a female referee isn't important. It doesn't matter whether she's married or has children.
Mona Abdulhamid has successfully made the change from player to referee. The highlight of her career so far was being selected to help referee in a major international game in her hometown of Alexandria. She hopes it'll be the first of many.
I refereed in an Arab Women's Championship game in Alexandria in 2006. It was the first time that the tournament was held. The referee for Egypt at the time, Gamal Al-Ghandour, vouched for me and made it possible for me to take part.
Mona Abdulhamid has blown the whistle on the male domination of Egyptian soccer. Now she hopes many more women will follow her lead and take to the pitch as referees.
An inspiring story. Now to a place that many of you probably know as a vacation hotspot. Acapulco lies on Mexico's Pacific coast, and the seaside resort city certainly does draw waves of tourists. But like any city, there's a story behind Acapulco's glitz and glamour. And that's exactly what we find in our next story. Reporter Teresa Luviano de Labra from OPD Radio y Televisión de Guerrero shows us how the city's winding streets and old houses hold the key to the real Acapulco.
Mexico's port city of Acapulco is famous for its beaches, tropical climate, and its lively nightlife. But few of the thousands of tourists who come to enjoy the sun, sand, and surf know much about the city's rich history. A distinctive feature preserved in the old houses of the El Pozo de la Nación district is their red tile roofs. The neighborhood's name dates back to the mid-19th century, when Acapulco was ravaged by an outbreak of cholera. In response, Mexico's president, Juan Alvarez Hurtado, ordered a thorough cleaning of the old town and the digging of a well for public use. The well was funded by the state and became known as the nation's well. In time, the name came to be applied to the entire quarter. The Franciscan monk, Bartolomeo Laurel Diaz, was born in El Pozo de la Nacion. He was martyred in 1627 in Nagasaki, Japan, and was later beatified by the then ruling pope. The district of Petaquillas is not far from the San Diego fort, built in the 17th century by order of King Philip III of Spain. With a lick of paint, local historian Arturo Zuniga Guzman thinks the district could be a big hit with tourists.
If we could paint these alleyways, they could attract tourists.
Let's
go all the way to the top. And here, the authorities haven't made any effort at all to fix up these passages, to try to make them more attractive.
Bartolomeo Laurel Diaz may have hailed from El Pozo de la Nacion, but a church in his honor was built here in the Petaquillas district.
He traveled to the Philippines, where he devoted himself to converting people to Christianity. And from there he went to Nagasaki in Japan, where unfortunately he was killed, together with many other Christian missionaries.
Some of Acapulco's neighborhoods were given their names because of their close proximity to the sea. This is the Barrio de la Playa, or the beach quarter. It's also dotted with narrow streets and red tile roofs. But it's the families who live here that give it a real sense of community.
Doña Anita! I'm just stopping by to say hello. She used to be in the water skiing club. She took to the water like a fish and was well known all over old Acapulco.
When I got married, my husband had a motorboat, and we advertised to get people interested in learning how to water ski. I took part in the presentations.
How many years have you been running this shop?
Since 1930.
And how many guitars did your grandfather build?
We've never counted, but definitely more than 100,000.
100,000 guitars.
Perro Lago is another of Acapulco's famous sons. He hailed from the district of La Posita and taught prominent visitors how to dive. Along the way, he made Acapulco famous.
He taught diving to movie stars and to people like John F. Kennedy's brothers, Robert and Edward Kennedy. He also taught Dr. Milton Eisenhower, who was the brother of former U.S. President Dwight D. Eisenhower.
Hermano del expresidente Dwight Eisenhower.
One of Acapulco's oldest neighborhoods is La Guinea. It was given its name because slaves from Spanish Guinea in Africa were quartered here on arrival. The district of La Poza got its name from a hill where a barracks once stood. Water flowed down from a spring on one side. The residents of this neighborhood have also done their bit to shape modern-day Acapulco. Past and present meet in these alleyways. Saints, prostitutes, athletes, heroes, and farmers, they all came together to give this seaside resort its unique identity.
And And finally this week, we visit a project that's helping to make the world a little bit greener. Mount Kenya is the second highest peak in Africa and provides a crucial source of water for the country. It stores rain during the wet season and releases it during the dry months. But deforestation has worn down the forests and triggered drought and despair in the surrounding areas. That's where a group of school children come in. They're trying to restore Mount Kenya's landscape and its precious water. UNTV's James here has more.
It may not look like it, but 12-year-old Morris Kaboro is helping to improve Kenya's water supply. He's teaching his grandfather the importance of trees.
I've told my grandfather that it's important to plant trees. Trees help us by giving us shade, but they also give shade to our crops so that when it rains, the trees will conserve moisture.
Kaboro learned everything he knows about trees and water from his teachers at school, and of course from hands-on experience. So far, he and his school friends have planted more than 4,000 trees. Their efforts are part of a larger program that has already rehabilitated 2,600 hectares of forest and increased water flow from one of the country's most important sources of water, Mount Kenya. Faith Johnson from the Mount Kenya East Pilot Project says it's key.
In Kenya, we have the 5 water towers, and Mount Kenya is one of the most significant in this country. And the government is very keen in conserving this water tower for the growth of the economy and employment creation and food security.
The Mount Kenya Forest Reserve is an hour's drive from Kaboro's primary school. It's not hard to see why the mountain is called a water tower in these parts. As fog blows over the forest, the trees absorb moisture and later release it back into the air. That contributes to the rain cycle and ensures a steady flow of clean water further downstream. But 4 decades of heavy logging have taken their toll on the forest. Slower water flow and soil erosion have made farming the land increasingly difficult. Most of the locals rely on farming for their livelihood, and many have fallen into poverty.
Soil fertility is very, very important. And when there is soil erosion, continuous soil erosion, it depletes the soil, it becomes less fertile, less productive, and when it's less productive, the food security is threatened, and therefore the farmer becomes poor. The poorer they are, the more they deplete the resources. They go on cutting the trees within these rural settings, and it becomes a vicious cycle.
The planting program hopes to stop that cycle. It aims to teach Kenyan society the importance of trees, and project organizers say the process begins with school children like Kaboro. Kaboro is encouraged to share what he's learned with his family at home. In his case, with his grandfather, Adriano.
Kaboro has taught me how to plant trees and where to plant them. He's also taught me how to prune and care for them.
Adriano used to cut down trees for firewood. But now, thanks to Kaboro's influence, he prunes his trees and uses the cutting for cooking and heating. His efforts seem to be paying off.
Within the short time that we've been planting trees, it seems like there's more water. As more people start taking part in the program, we see changes in the streams, which before were drying up. There's more water than there was before.
Many others are also feeling the effects of the planting program. It's now estimated that more than 7 million seedlings have been planted along the eastern slopes of Mount Kenya since 2005. Thanks to the efforts of pupils like Kaboro, the Kenyan government plans to start a national program in schools to help encourage children across the country to plant trees.
And that's it for this week's edition of World Stories. From all of us here and our partner stations around the world, we want to thank you for watching. Don't forget, you can catch up on all the latest World Stories episodes on our website. That's dw.de/worldstories. Before we go, we'll leave you with some images that caught our eye in this week's Picks of the World. See you next time for more World Stories.